Hello, everyone, and good morning. Thanks for joining us today for another Sutta study with Bhante Suddhaso. So today we'll be looking at the discourse to samādhi, and you can find the link to the sutta in the live chat if you'd like to follow along. So good morning so far to Gita, Jens, and Michael, and to all our friends who are also watching. And if you have questions at any time, feel free to type them into the live chat, and Bhante will address them at the end of the talk. So I'll pass things over to Bhante Suddhaso for today's sutta study.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhangam sanghang namasami. Good morning, friends. At least I hope you're friends. This morning we'll be practicing the contemplation of Dhamma, which in a number of discourses the Buddha speaks about as being one of the ways of attaining liberation right here in this moment. So often there's this misunderstanding that enlightenment happens during meditation and only during meditation. That's not necessarily true. There are countless places where somebody attains liberation by listening to a discourse being given, by hearing words of Dhamma, by hearing a sutta, by contemplating the meaning of a sutta, by reciting a sutta out loud by themselves, or by explaining a sutta. So what we're doing here in this morning's sutta study is itself a way of developing the mind of enlightenment, a mind of awakening. So taking it in this way, so as one listens to the words of the sutta, to listen attentively, to listen with one's full mind, to really bend one's mind to trying to understand the meaning of the words, to understand how these words are pointers towards awakening. So not just taking it as like, oh, here we go, another boring sutta. There's going to be a lot of repetition, and it's going to sound all clunky and formal and blah, blah, blah. Well, no, actually really listen. Be like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to gain wisdom. This is an opportunity for me to progress towards awakening. So taking this chance to contemplate the Dhamma. So this discourse we'll be looking at today is Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Threes, Sutta number 21. It's called the Samādhi Sutta. Another boring name of a sutta. It's the Discourse to Samādhi, which is actually not quite accurate even as we look at the sutta. It's not directed to samādhi, but rather it's a conversation between three bhikkhus. This is a relatively short sutta, so we might get through this fairly quickly. The sutta begins. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the fortunate one was living at Savatthi, at Jeta Grove, in Anathapindika's monastery. Then Venerable Samādhi and Venerable Mahakotita approached Venerable Sariputta and conversed with him. So this is setting the groundwork. So the Buddha was living close by, and these three monks start a conversation. So Venerable Samādhi, who I'm not sure appears anywhere else in the Pali Canon, actually. I don't know that I've come across Samādhi anywhere. Let's just have a quick look. So he's not a well-known bhikkhu. There's nothing major on him. Okay, he does actually appear a couple other places in the suttas, but he's a very insignificant character. He doesn't have any notable characteristics. But Mahakotita gives some of the suttas. So some of the suttas in the Pali Canon are delivered by Venerable Mahakotita, who's known for his detailed analytical approach. And also Venerable Sariputta, of course, is the Buddha's chief wisdom disciple who gives many of the suttas that we find in the Pali Canon. and also is known for a very analytical, step-by-step way of teaching the Dhamma. So Venerable Samita and Venerable Mahakotita are going to Venerable Sariputta to have a conversation with him. So the implication here, by the way, is that they are regarding Sariputta as a teacher, as somebody who might be able to give them some instruction in Dhamma. So the sutta continues. When the appropriate polite conversation was finished, they sat to one side. It's interesting here that nobody bowed to anybody. Like there's no mention of this monk paying respects to that monk. They just all had a polite conversation and then sat down together. Venerable Sariputta said to Venerable Samita, Venerable Samita, there are three kinds of people found in the world. What three? The body witness, the view attainer, and the faith liberated. Venerable, these are the three kinds of people found in the world. Venerable, of these three kinds of people, which one appeals to you as the most transcendent and the most excellent? So this is introducing the core concept of the sutta, which is these three ways of developing the path to awakening. So three things that we can emphasize or focus on. So three things that can be the foundation of our path. And the sutta goes into not much description of these three. So I'll go ahead and read through the answers that each person gives, and then I'll speak a bit more about these three kinds of people and how to relate to this. So Venerable Samita replies, Venerable Sariputta, there are three kinds of people found in the world. Of these three kinds of people, the one who is a body witness is the one which appeals to me as the most transcendent and the most excellent. For what reason? Venerable, this person's samādhi faculty is extraordinary. So body witness, so in Pali that's kaya sakki. So body witness is a very literal translation of this term. So kaya means body, and sakki literally means with your own eyes. So sa means with, and akki means eye. So sakki means with your eye. So that is usually used in the suttas to mean somebody who has witnessed something with their own eyes. So they've seen it for themselves. So kaya also, besides meaning body, it can also mean personal. So one who has personally experienced something, somebody who has a direct experience of something. So a kaya sakki is someone who, body witness would be a very literal sense, someone who's felt something directly with their own body. But another meaning of this would be someone who has a direct personal experience of something, somebody who's really felt it for themselves, seen it for themselves. And the kaya sakki, the body witness, it's not talked about particularly often in the suttas. But this is somebody who has developed samādhi, who's focused on the development of samādhi. Somebody who has developed samādhi to the point where they have extensive direct experience with the four jhanas. And usually the kaya sakki is also described as having experience of the four formless samādhis as well. So normally we talk about 8 levels of samādhi, and sometimes we add on a 9th or a 10th, depending on what sutta you're looking at. So 8 levels of samādhi, 8 stages of samādhi. The first 4 are the most important. The first 4 are the 4 jhanas. So the jhana states are states in which the mind is completely peaceful, very joyful. The mind does not stray from its meditation object at all. In states of jhana, the body is normally completely still. The body is completely still, very relaxed, very peaceful. The mind is completely alert, but without being agitated. The mind is completely alert, but completely free of the 5 hindrances. So there's no sensual desire, there's no aversion, there's no dullness of mind. So the mind is very alert. It's not dull or sleepy. There's no restlessness or remorse or agitation present in the mind. The mind is very tranquil, very steady. And there's no doubt or skepticism. The mind is completely immersed in this experience. So there's no space for it to doubt anything. There's no space for getting lost in confusion. And so the 4 jhanas are progressively deepening stages of serenity of mind. So the first stage of jhana, so it has all the characteristics I just mentioned. So the mind is very peaceful. It's free of sensual desire and aversion. It's very alert, but without being agitated. There's no movement of body. There's no deliberate movement of mind, but there still can be a certain amount of background noise in the mind. So that's the first stage of jhana. The second stage of jhana, the background noise fades from the mind. So there's no longer background noise in the mind. And the first and second jhana are both characterized by a very extremely intense euphoria, which is felt all through body and mind. And this is one of the most distinct characteristics of first and second jhana, is this very powerful physical and mental euphoria, which accompanies first and second jhana. With third jhana, as one becomes increasingly peaceful, as one's mind moves more towards tranquility, then the physical euphoria fades away. There still persists a sense of joyfulness of mind, but the physical euphoria fades. As one becomes focused more on tranquility, then euphoria becomes less interesting, and it melts into the background. In fourth jhana, then as one moves more and more into tranquility, then the focus of the mind becomes equanimity. So this unshakable, undisturbable peace of mind. So that joyfulness of mind also is a little bit agitating and distracting. So the mind also turns away from that bubbliness of mind and turns towards tranquility, towards stillness, towards equanimity. That's the fourth jhana. And so the 4 jhanas are things which the Buddha speaks about over and over and over and over and over again throughout the suttas as being something which is very important to develop in the course of our practice. And he also sometimes talks about the 4 formless attainments, which are states of concentration in which the physical world completely disappears. So in the first 4 jhanas, there's still awareness of the physical world. There's still awareness of your body. There's not necessarily much interest in the physical world because one is focused on samādhi, focused on tranquilizing the mind. But there's still awareness of the physical world. But in the 4 formless attainments, which are beyond the 4th jhana, after the 4th jhana, then the physical world disappears entirely. So the first stage is the awareness of infinite space, in which the physical world disappears entirely and is replaced by the perception of just open, unhindered, empty space extending infinitely in all directions. That's the first formless attainment. The second formless attainment is recognizing that infinite space is permeated by consciousness. So one's attention turns from the space itself to the consciousness that fills that space. And this is also important because space is technically a physical thing. So turning from infinite space towards infinite consciousness is going deeper into the mind. So it's a natural progression in this turning away from the physical that happens in the 4 formless attainments. Following the perception of infinite consciousness as the perception of nothingness. So in this one lets go of the appearance of anything, of any distinct object or thing. So there's not even the awareness of infinite space or of infinite consciousness. There's simply the awareness that there's nothing whatsoever. So it's important to note, by the way, that the experience of nothingness is not a wisdom realization. It's just a temporary conditional experience of mind. So it's the experience of nothing existing. But the reason why there seems to be nothing existing is because in this state, in this samādhi state, the mind is completely introverted to where it's no longer paying any attention whatsoever to the outside world. It's no longer paying any attention whatsoever to physical things at all. To the point where all appearance of things disappears from awareness. So through non-attention to all things, you can get to a point where your mind just stops registering the existence of anything at all, except for itself. So that's the experience of nothingness, the awareness of nothingness. And it should be pointed out, by the way, that there is a certain danger in that particular attainment, in that people often mistake it for enlightenment. So there's a number of records of Buddhist monks, actually, over the past couple thousand years, who reached a stage where it seemed to them that nothing whatsoever existed. And then they came to the conclusion that that was enlightenment. But if you read their accounts, then it's quite clear that all they had done is attained the stage of akinchanya yatanam. So this perception of nothingness, this introverted state of mind in which one disregards the appearance of all things. But that's not enlightenment. It's just a temporary state of mind caused by ignoring the existence of objects. So it's possible to reach these states of mind, but they're not necessarily critical for attaining awakening. Then the fourth one is called the stage of neither perception nor non-perception. And this is where the mind enters into a very refined state in which it's not engaging in any mental activity whatsoever, and yet it's still awake. So this is why it's called neither perception nor non-perception. There's no perception happening, and that the mind is not engaging in any perceptual activity whatsoever, which normally is something which happens only when you're asleep or immersed in the experience of nirvana. But it can also happen in this state where the mind is not engaged in any mental activity whatsoever. And yet it's still awake, which is why it can't be called non-perception either. So there's no perceptual activity, and yet the mind is still awake. So neither perception nor non-perception, which in the suttas is quite clearly indicated to be a completely useless state of mind. Utterly pointless. No value whatsoever. And it's notable in the suttas, it's also clearly stated that during any of the four jhanas, one can develop insight and wisdom while in the jhana state. And while in the first three formless attainments, so the perception of infinite space, infinite consciousness, and the perception of nothingness, it's also possible to develop insight and wisdom. But in the fourth state, the state of neither perception nor non-perception, it is impossible to develop wisdom. Cannot happen. There's no way to develop insight of any sort because there's no mental activity going on in which insight could germinate, in which insight can grow. So this eighth formless attainment is kind of useless except as a novelty, and also as something to understand, because one of the Buddha's teachers, before he realized that nobody knew how to attain enlightenment and he had to figure it out on his own, before that he had training from some of the meditation masters at the time. One of them was teaching that enlightenment was to attain the perception of nothingness. So the Buddha practiced meditation with that teacher and reached the perception of nothingness and realized that that wasn't enlightenment. It was just another temporary state of mind. So he went off to find another teacher and found another teacher who's teaching an even more refined state of mind, which was neither perception nor non-perception, and saying that that was enlightenment. So the Buddha practiced until he got to the experience of neither perception nor non-perception, but he realized that also was just a temporary state of mind. And it did not remove his defilements. It did not remove his delusions. It was just a temporary state of mind that with a lot of effort and practice, you could get into for a little while, and you would come out of it, and things would still be crappy, and there was still a lot of mess in your own mind that needed to be cleaned up. So that was when the Buddha realized that even the best meditation teachers at the time didn't know how to attain enlightenment, and that he was going to have to figure it out on his own. Then he set out and figured out Buddhism on his own. So then there can be some value in experiencing the formless attainments, because then one can understand how people get confused by these states into thinking that they're a deep wisdom realization. And one can relate to them. One can understand the scope of what the mind is capable of while still being deluded. One can understand that the mind can have incredibly amazing spiritual experiences that seem very deep and profound, but which actually don't purify the mind of its defilements, which don't develop penetrating insight or wisdom. So there is some value to developing some direct experience of the formless attainments. The formless attainments also can arise as a natural result of dropping one's attachment to the body and dropping one's attachment to the sensual world, which also is, I think, why there's some relevance to Buddhist practice. Because as we work on letting go of sensual desire and releasing our attachment to the body, then the attainment of these formless attainments becomes much more feasible. It's very difficult for a sensualist to enter the perception of nothingness. But as we start to diminish our sensuality, these states of mind become easier to access. So the body witness is normally described as somebody who attains all 8 of these. They have extensive experience. They can easily access all 8 of these states of mind, the 4 jhanas and the 4 formless attainments. The 9th attainment, which is sometimes spoken about, is called the cessation of perception and feeling, which I'm not going to go into detail on now. But briefly speaking, one can see it as the temporary immersion in the nibbana dhatu. That's one way it's sometimes spoken about. A temporary, incomplete immersion in the nibbana dhatu, which is a useful state of mind. So unlike the 4 formless attainments, the cessation of perception and feeling is a useful state of mind because it's a direct experience of the deathless. It's a direct experience of the unconditioned, which does culminate in wisdom, and it does help one diminish one's defilements. So the kayasaki, the body witness, is somebody who has this extreme development of samadhi, this extraordinary development of samadhi, with this intimate familiarity with the 4 jhanas and the 4 formless attainments. So Venerable Samādhi is like, this is the one that I like. This is the one that I think is the best. So then, that was Venerable Mahakotita. Sorry, I was saying it was Venerable Samādhi who replied with the body witness, but it was Venerable Mahakotita. So Venerable Samādhi, he said that the one that appeals to him the most is the one who is the faith liberated. He said, the one who is faith liberated is the one which appeals to me as the most transcendent and the most excellent. For what reason? Because this person's faith faculty is extraordinary. So there's, again, the body witness, the view attainer, and the faith liberated. So the faith liberated, this is a character who is very rarely spoken about in the suttas. So normally in the suttas, there's a lot of emphasis placed upon samadhi and wisdom as being the primary characteristics which are the immediate precedents to enlightenment, the immediate precedents to awakening. But here there's found this emphasis on one who is liberated by faith. So saddha vimutti. And of course, it's impossible to attain enlightenment purely by faith. But it's important to recognize that the Buddha speaks about faith over and over and over again throughout the suttas. He speaks about the value of faith as providing a solid foundation for one's practice. The value of faith as being something which keeps us always pointed unerringly towards awakening. And the reason for this is because, one, if we have faith in the Buddha, faith that the Buddha was in fact a fully enlightened being, then that means that naturally we have faith that enlightenment is possible. So this is the standard way that faith is normally defined in the suttas. When the word saddha, or faith, is defined, it's normally defined as faith in the awakening of the Tathagata, faith that the Buddha was enlightened, faith that the Buddha had the qualities that we normally recite every morning. Etipiso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vichachana sampanno sugato lokavido anutro persidama sarita satta deva manusanam buddho bhagava. So that the Buddha was fully enlightened, that his knowledge and conduct was perfect, that he was capable of teaching anyone who was ready to be taught, that he taught both humans and celestial beings, that he knew the world and all its details. So this is the standard description of faith, is having faith in the transcendence of the Buddha, in the awakening of the Buddha, in the wisdom and purity of the Buddha, and in the perfect teaching abilities of the Buddha. So when one has that kind of faith, then naturally one is inclined to commit oneself to the Dhamma, to commit oneself to learning the Dhamma and understanding the Dhamma and practicing the Dhamma, living in accordance with the Dhamma. And naturally one is inclined towards faith in the value of the Sangha, the value of living with other Buddhist practitioners who are well developed in the path and are sincerely committed to practicing the path. So faith in and of itself does not cause enlightenment. Technically, the only factor that directly causes enlightenment is actually wisdom. But faith is a quality which means that we will progress much more swiftly along the path. So with faith, then we will not hesitate. We will not doubt. We will not be skeptical. We will not vacillate. There's this rock solid feeling of the tangible reality of the Buddha, just as if you could reach out and touch him with your own hands. There's a sense of his tangible reality, just as I can touch this little table in front of me. There's no doubt about it. In the same way, there's no doubt whatsoever that the Buddha was fully enlightened. There's no doubt whatsoever that he taught the path to awakening that works for anyone who follows it. There's no doubt whatsoever that the Dhamma leads unerringly towards the highest, most desirable goal imaginable. So with that kind of rock solid faith, then naturally, one's practice is going to be very strong. Naturally, one's practice is going to be determined, resolute, powerful. So Venerable Samidda places this huge importance on the faith faculty, on one who is liberated through faith. Well, what are they liberated from? They're liberated from skepticism. They're liberated from doubt. They're liberated from confusion. They're liberated from uncertainty. So there's this sense of freedom and joy of knowing the Buddha is enlightened and we have the Dhamma and all we have to do is just follow it and we'll get to enlightenment for ourselves. So there's this sense of lightness and joy and ease that comes. And the path becomes very clear and straightforward. So I remember before I was Buddhist, when I was a teenager and I'd lost faith in the religion I was raised with, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what was important, and I didn't know what was good and what was bad, and I didn't know what was important and what was unimportant. I didn't know what was valuable and what was not valuable. And I wound up flailing around in this confused, vague fog for years until finally I came across the Dhamma. I came across the Dhamma, and it was like a light had come into the darkness. And it's like, oh, that's better. And I still continued flailing around for a while, but not for much longer, because the purity of the Dhamma was undeniable. And the more I probed into the Dhamma, the more it became clear that this was the teachings of an enlightened being. It couldn't possibly be anything else. So faith started to arise. And as the faith started to arise, then a sense of clarity began to emerge in the mind. That darkness and fog started to lift from the mind, and the path started to become clear, bright, radiant. So the mind is liberated from that dark, dull fog of confusion and uncertainty that comes before we understand the Dhamma. So this emphasis on the faith faculty, again, while faith itself technically does not cause liberation, it clears the path to liberation. It lights the path to liberation. It points the way to liberation. It's a very valuable state of mind. And the body witness, so the one who cultivates extreme samadhi. Again, samadhi technically doesn't cause enlightenment either. But samadhi is how we train the mind. It's how we train the mind to be steady, to be bright, to be still, to be alert. It's how we cut away the surface manifestations of defilement so that we can clearly see the deeper layers of the subconscious mind. So we can clearly see the roots of the defilements so that we can dig up the roots as well. And through cultivating deep states of concentration, these deep attainments of mind which come through samadhi, we also develop faith in the ability to train the mind. We develop faith, we develop confidence that the mind can be trained beyond the ordinary. The mind can be trained to experience the world in a profoundly different way than that of the ordinary unawakened being. So the Mahakotita, who put this emphasis on the samadhi faculty, on the body witness, the one who feels for themselves what can change in our experience when the mind is well trained. He's also pointing to another aspect of faith, which is the faith that comes through direct experience of a well-trained mind. Then finally, the two of them realized the only one that's left is Sariputta. So then Venerable Mahakotita said to Venerable Sariputta, Venerable Sariputta, there are these three kinds of people found in the world. Which one appeals to you as the most transcendent and the most excellent? And Sariputta, being the wisdom type that he is, he responds, Venerable Kotita, there are three kinds of people found in the world. The one who is a view attainer is the one which appeals to me as the most transcendent and the most excellent. For what reason? Venerable, this person's wisdom faculty is extraordinary. So the view attainer, so in Pali, that's dittipatto. So one who has arrived at right view, samādhi, one who has reached a correct view of the nature of the world, a correct understanding of the way things are. And elsewhere in the suttas, this term dittipatta is equated with a stream enterer. So one who has attained sufficient right view, namely the right view that the body and mind are not me. Body and mind are not self. Body and mind are anicca and anatta, not me, not mine, not permanent, not stable. It's normally equated with stream entry. But in this sutta, it's clear that the dittipatta is taken in a more broad sense. So not limited just to being a stream enterer. But somebody who has the development of wisdom, the development of right view as being the core of their path, as being the essential component of their path. So whereas the faith-liberated person, the core of their path is faith. So faith in the Buddha, faith in the Dhamma, faith in the Sangha, faith in the training. So that's the core guiding light for them, is this rock-solid faith in the Buddha. And the body witness, the core of their practice is the development of samādhi. So training the mind in stability and clarity, training the mind to be extremely peaceful, joyful, and steady. The view attainer, the core of their practice is developing an understanding of the Dhamma, coming to know the Dhamma, developing an intellectual comprehension of the Dhamma, which can be confirmed through experience, which can be confirmed through what one sees and feels in one's life. So all of these three factors support each other and play together. But one might reflect on one's own mind and see which one of these three one aligns with the most strongly. And in my case, I actually feel a strong affinity with all three of these. Do I have faith in the Buddha? Absolutely. Yeah, no question. Do I have samādhi? Do I value samādhi and place a lot of value and importance on samādhi? I do. I don't have it developed to the point of all 8 attainments. I'm still working on that. But there's that feeling that through samādhi, one can point the mind ever closer and closer to the truth. Through samādhi, one can clear away all of the superficial distractions of the mind, so one can get directly at the root of the problem. And also the view attainer. So studying the Dhamma, learning the Dhamma, contemplating the Dhamma, discussing the Dhamma has always been a critical central element of my own path. It's always been a critical component of how I've approached and practiced Buddhism. So in my case, in each one of these 3 kinds of people, I can see some reflection of myself. I can see the value and benefit of that way of practicing. So perhaps look at your own mind and see, is there one of these 3 which really strongly resonates for you? Do you really strongly resonate with the faith-liberated one? Or do you strongly liberate with the body witness, the samādhi type? Or do you really strongly liberate with the view attainer, the one who focuses on a comprehension of the Dhamma, who focuses on developing a concept of right view? So then the sutta continues. Then Venerable Sariputta said to Venerable Samidda and Venerable Mahakotita, Venerables, we have each answered according to our own inspiration. Come, let us go to the Fortunate One and report this to him. We will remember whatever explanation he gives. In other words, each one of the 3 answered according to their own tendency, their own predilection, their own strength. So Venerable Samidda answered that he likes the faith type because he's a faith type. Venerable Mahakotita likes the samādhi type because that's his thing. He's big on samādhi. Venerable Sariputta answered that he liked the view attainer because that's his thing. He's really big on developing this intellectual understanding of right view. So then Venerable Samidda and Venerable Mahakotita reply, yes, Venerable. Then they go to the Fortunate One, paid respects to him, and sat to one side. And Venerable Sariputta reported to the Fortunate One the entire conversation that had taken place. And the Buddha replies, Sariputta, it is not easy to give a one-sided answer, such as, of these 3 kinds of people, this one is the most transcendent and most excellent. Sariputta, it is possible that the person who is faith liberated might have practiced to become an arhat, whereas the body witness might only be a once returner or a non-returner. And the view attainer might also only be a once returner or a non-returner. Sariputta, it is not easy to give a one-sided answer, such as, of these three kinds of people, this one is the most excellent and most transcendent and most excellent. Sariputta, it is possible that the person who is a body witness might have practiced to become an arhat, whereas the faith liberated might only be a once returner or a non-returner, and the view attainer might also only be a once returner or a non-returner. Sariputta, it is not easy to give a one-sided answer, such as, of these three kinds of people, this one is the most transcendent and most excellent. Sariputta, it is possible that the person who is a view attainer might have practiced to become an arhat, whereas the faith liberated might only be a once returner or a non-returner, and the body witness might also only be a once returner or a non-returner. Sariputta, it is not easy to give a one-sided answer, such as, of these three kinds of people, this one is the most transcendent and most excellent. So they go to the Buddha, and the Buddha basically says that you can't say that any one of these three is better than any other. Because, of course, this is our tendency. Our tendency is to say, oh, well, the view attainer naturally is the best one, because the view attainer has got the best wisdom, and wisdom is what leads to enlightenment. The view attainer is the best. But actually, if somebody focuses on understanding the Dhamma, but their samādhi is terrible and their faith is weak, no enlightenment for you. No, fail. So much losing. Or somebody might have very strong samādhi, but they don't really understand the Dhamma very clearly. Or maybe their faith is not particularly strong. They just like sitting peacefully for hours on end. That's like, well, that's great, but you're still not going to reach enlightenment. You can sit there in fourth jhana all day long, but if you don't have faith in the Buddha and you don't cultivate wisdom, then you're just going to keep sitting there in fourth jhana all day long, and it will never go one step closer to enlightenment. And similarly, you can have all the faith in the world. You can be absolutely rock solid confident that the Buddha was fully enlightened and the Dhamma is amazing, and you don't actually practice any of it. Well, once again, you're not getting one step closer to enlightenment. If you don't develop samādhi and panya, if you don't cultivate concentration and wisdom, then all that faith isn't doing you so much good. I mean, it's good, it's better than nothing, but it's not going to lead you to enlightenment by itself. So the Buddha is pointing out here, he says it's possible that someone whose faith liberated, from the basis of that powerful faith, they might also develop the samādhi and the wisdom necessary to attain awakening. Or somebody who's a body witness, from the basis of that powerful samādhi, they might experience faith in the path, and they might use that stable, concentrated mind to develop direct insight. And similarly, the view attainer, as we start to get some intellectual understanding of the Dhamma, then naturally we want to have a deep experiential understanding as well. And for that to be possible, then we need to have faith that awakening is accessible, and we need to develop samādhi so that we can penetrate that wisdom deep into the subconscious mind. So ultimately, all three of these aspects are necessary in order to have a complete and functional path to awakening. We need to have faith, we need to have samādhi, and we need to have wisdom. And all of these support each other and work together. And any one of these three can be the core of our path, the emphasis of our path, as long as we make sure to bring along the other two as supporting conditions, supporting factors. So that's what I wanted to talk about this morning. So those are my thoughts on this sutta, the Samādhi Sutta. If you have any questions or comments, this is your opportunity to put them in, and I'll answer as best I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And there's a number of questions and comments from Gita.
Oh. Which Gita?
Jnana. So one question you already answered when they asked about the cessation of perception and feeling. the other question is, once you emerge from jhana, can one then contemplate on the world transcending Dhamma, that is the Four Noble Truths and the 12 links of dependent origination?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and the next question is this where one would see impermanence, dukkha, and no self?
You can see those at any time, actually, except for in the cessation of the state of neither perception or non-perception, and in the cessation of perception and feeling. So except for those two states of mind, you can always see anicca, dukkha, anatta. So it's quite clear in the suttas that even while in jhana, you can still see anicca, dukkha, anatta. And that this can be a way of developing liberating insight.
Okay. And then Gita also asks, Bhante, don't most people develop all three factors as they progress on the path?
I think I answered that.
Yeah. And Michael says, all three seem to be established to the point that they're inexorably bound for nibbana. That is, they all will attain nibbana.
Yeah.
And Mila says, I always wanted someone to explain this sutta, so thanks for your faith and wisdom. And then Maitreya T asks, they say it's similar to developing sila, samadhi, and panya, probably in reference to the three different.
Not quite, because I wouldn't equate faith with sila. No, some of the interesting things about the sutta is that sila actually isn't mentioned at all. But there's the underlying assumption that all three of these people already have perfect sila. So it's not specifically mentioned because it's just taken as a given. It's like naturally you already have good sila. Why would you not? So I wouldn't equate faith with sila. I think that'd be a misunderstanding of the sutta.
And Michael asks, can we say that concentration on one of these will bring along the others, as a thorough understanding of one aspect of the 12 links of dependent origination will bring along the others?
I wouldn't necessarily. I think that's what the Buddha was pointing to at the end of the sutta, where he says that somebody might concentrate on one of these, but fall short of full awakening. So I think that it's still necessary to make sure that we're developing a complete path. Again, I've met a lot of Buddhists who their faith is really strong, but then they waste away their lives getting married and having children and making money and doing all the other pointless things that people do with their lives. And then they die confused, and good luck. And I've also met people who've got great samadhi. They show up at the monastery and they sit unmoving for hours on end, and they're jerks. They're the most intolerable people. And you're just like, OMG, seriously, what is wrong with you? And they don't seem to have the vaguest clue what the Buddha was talking about. They got great samadhi, but they're not going anywhere in terms of enlightenment. And then you get people who show up and they can quote chapter and verse from the suttas. They always seem to know exactly when and where the Buddha said this and that, and how many times and in what different forms. But then you start probing a little bit and you realize that they actually don't really have much confidence that enlightenment is achievable. And their minds are scattered and all over the place. So no, developing one of these deeply does not automatically bring along the other two, which is one of the things that I feel like the sutta is trying to point to, it's trying to bring out, is that it's fine to have one of these as being the core center of your practice, but you need to make sure that you're also getting the other elements of the path as well. Because otherwise you might not be developing a complete path to awakening. Okay.
Thank you. And then Jens asks, you discussed the importance of truly listening. Can you discuss how we can develop this skill further?
Yeah, actually, the Buddha, in a number of places in the suttas, he gives a description. And I don't remember it verbatim off the top of my head, but he says one listens, one gives one's ears, one devotes one's entire mind to understanding, listening as though it was a matter of life and death. So that kind of mind. So when it's a matter of life and death, are we like, oh, the butterfly, so nice? No, we're focused. We're like, yes, I want to hear everything because this is a matter of life and death. Devoting your whole mind to understand, not devoting 1% of your mind to understanding and 99% to spacing out. 1% to understanding and 99% to daydreaming. No, 100%. Devote your entire mind to understanding. Giving your ears. So you're devoting all your attention to listening, to trying to understand. Again, as though you were hanging from the edge of a cliff and someone was trying to explain to you how to get to safety. You would really pay attention and really try to understand. You got this clear sense, my fingers are slipping. If I don't figure this out, I'm going to plummet to my death any moment now. So you're going to pay all the attention you can and really try to understand. So that's how we should listen to the Dhamma. That's how we should read the suttas. As though we're slipping off the edge of a cliff and someone's trying to explain to us how to get to safety. Okay?
Jens also said, I don't know why, but I never thought about how many attain liberation through listening to the Dhamma. And Bhavani asks, what sort of wisdom will arrive in, they say Shena, but maybe they mean jhana, and how to use that knowledge in day-to-day activities?
So states of jhana, as I mentioned earlier, it's states in which one ceases volitional thought and body movement, and cultivates a very powerful steadiness of mind and alertness of mind. And what makes that so potent? Well, first off, it makes us realize that we're not the victims of our own thoughts, that we can control our own mind if we want to. But it also gives us the laser sharp precision, the microscopic precision to clearly see the operation of the subconscious mind. And this is very important because our experience of the world is built in our subconscious mind. Our experience of pleasure and pain is built in our subconscious mind. So without understanding our subconscious mind, we will just seem to be the victim of the world all the time. But through clearly seeing the subconscious mind, we can gain control of our own world. And that's done through samadhi. Samadhi is powering up the microscope so you can clearly see the minutest, tiniest, the most refined details of the mind. Things that we normally miss entirely because we're too busy thinking about pasta and cleaning projects. Well, stop thinking about pasta, stop thinking about cleaning projects, stop thinking about anything at all while cranking up the attention power of the mind and holding the mind completely still. And you'll start to see the vast currents of movement beneath the surface of the mind. And you'll start to realize that's the bedrock of your experience. It's not the thoughts about pasta and cleaning projects. That's not the bedrock of your experience. That's just some dirt floating on the surface. But beneath that, there are these powerful currents which flow through the subconscious mind. That's the bedrock of our experience. And if we can get that clearly into view, then we start to understand what we're doing that's making us so miserable and confused all the time, and start changing it. Another, as you talk about daily application of jhana, daily application of samadhi. Well, actually, a very simple example of this is that every now and then you'll catch yourself thinking about random things and you'll realize, oh, I don't need to do this, and you'll stop. And your mind will become very silent very sharp, very alert, very peaceful, and very joyful in the middle of your day, whatever you're doing. You'll be like, oh, this is so much nicer. Why don't I do this all the time? And then about a tenth of a second later, you'll go back to thinking about random stupid things. But you'll have that little glimpse, that little window of what it's like to live with a peaceful mind. And you'll be like, oh, I can do this. I can do this whenever I want. It just takes training and practice. That's also a very useful daily application of samadhi. You can get to a point where your mind is actually pretty silent most of the time, which is wonderful. It's truly wonderful. Okay.
Maitreya T asks, is believing in karma part of faith?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to put this very simply. If you don't believe in karma, you will never attain enlightenment. And you're probably going to hell. Okay? Next question. Any other questions? The question reader is trying to suppress his laughter.
Okay. Thank you. Michael says, thank you, Bhante. A powerful sutta to contemplate. I would have thought that great samadhi would overcome jerkiness, but guess not. I've met those kind of people as well.
Yeah, not necessarily. In fact, samadhi types are often really irritable because they don't want to deal with anybody, and they don't want to do the work projects, and they don't want to help out with any of the monastery chores. They just want to go sit silently somewhere. And they're really irritated that you expect them to do things like help with the dishes. And they're really irritated that they have to like follow the schedule and talk to people and stuff. And then they actually get into samadhi and they're all blissed out and they're sitting there like, oh, such bliss, oh, samadhi. Oh. Then the bell rings and they're like, So yeah, actually samadhi types can be quite troubling to deal with if they don't develop the wisdom to apply the lesson of samadhi to their everyday experiences. Because the blessings of samadhi can carry through while you're washing the dishes and sweeping the floor and talking to the guests and doing whatever there is that needs to be done. You can still have that peaceful, joyful mind. It's just not the same as when you're sitting still, but you can still have that peace of mind. But that requires some application of wisdom. Okay.
And Sienna had said
that she's going to come stay here forever.
Earlier on. Sounds like the same old religious stuff, but I don't, because I didn't. It was before your emphatic remarks, so I'm not sure exactly what it was in relation to, because it was earlier on.
Okay.
But there have been a number of emphatic remarks, so.
Well, every now and then people try to claim that Buddhism is not a religion. I don't know what they're talking about. Buddhism is a religion. Let's just face the facts already.
And Melinda and Jens were also cracking up as well. Melinda said, "LOL, Bhante!" exclamation. And Gita Jnana says, Gita is going to come and stay there forever.
Yes, yes, come.
All right. Well, that was the final comment so far and question. So thanks everyone for joining in. You can join us tonight for Monk Chat, where there may be Bhantes and an Aya, just an Aya, other Bhantes, just Bhantes, who knows. But join us then at 7:30 for Monk Chat. So you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions that are still lingering, maybe about anything you heard today, as well as anything related to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, or somewhat related. And then tomorrow morning, the Empty Cloud Sangha will be doing alms round at West Orange Farmers Market at around 9 a.m. or so. And then afterwards, we'll have outdoor meditation at 3 p.m. here at the monastery. And in between those two events, there will be a garage sale with the proceeds going to feed people affected deeply by the pandemic. And then if you're around or if you want to travel on Sunday for our Katina celebration, so pretty much all day Sunday from 10 to 5, if you can stop by for the Katina giving ceremony, lunch, meditation, talks, and noble friendship, then please do come with a mask, but it will be outdoors. And that's all we have going on for the rest of this week. But join us next week again if you can't make any of those. And always great to see everyone. We can end with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And have a great day.